find a trusted human being to share that stuff with. Build your relationship with that person. Share with them honestly, and don't run away. Don't hide. Don't think that it's unforgivable or whatever. You need to make sure that you are sharing with another human being.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unscripted. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Desiree, and I am the young adults pastor here at Broadway, and I'm so excited for today and for our guest. We have Pastor Shiela with us, and I'm very excited because Pastor Shiela is actually my office neighbor. But every time I walk by her office, she's praying with someone, talking with someone. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know Pastor Shiela. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Des.
Good. Thank you for being with us. So before we get started, I'm just curious, can you please explain to us what you do here at Broadway for those who don't know?
Sure. I'm on the pastoral care team, so do hospital visits and help with memorials with Pastor Paul Moores, and I also currently oversee Celebrate Recovery.
That's awesome. That's a lot. And that's why I guess I always see people in your office. And so I'm just wondering, what is one fun fact about you, Pastor Shiela?
Just one?
Yeah, just one, and make it really, really good because you only have one shot.
I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flying hours. My dad and I owned an airplane together.
Whoa,
yes.
That's amazing. So how old were you when you got your flying license?
That's the problem.
Oh.
I was in northern BC at the time, and when I had the money, I didn't have the time. And when I had the time, I didn't have the money. When I had both, there was no instructors. So I had to always fly with my dad. I was very close to doing a solo flight, but didn't quite get there.
That's really exciting. I had no idea. So when you take an airplane, are you secretly like a backseat driver thinking they should be doing certain things?
No. I trust the pilots that I'm with, but I think if the pilot had some sort of distress, I probably could land it.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. So
a small plane.
Okay, all right.
I'm not sure I'd be very good at jets or whatever.
Okay, all right. Well, you never know until you try, so maybe one day you'll get to try again. Well, Pastor Shiela, as we're going to get to know you a little bit more, my first question for you is, I'm wondering, what was your first experience with God?
Good question, Des. I think, there's a saying that hindsight is 20/20. And I think as I look back, I can see God's hand of protection and provision in my life from a very young age. As a family, we were probably what we call C&Eers, Christmas and Easter. My dad never went to church until he was in his 50s or 60s. My mom would drag us off to church Christmas and Easter. I remember as a kid, those little tiny chairs were always brightly colored, little wooden chairs, always brightly colored. And I remember those. And I remember the pencil we'd get that said, Jesus loves you, right? So those are religion. Right. I would say that was my religious experiences. Getting to know Jesus in a personal relationship, totally different. I was an adult. I was living in Vernon at the time. I found myself without a home, without a source of income. You could say I was homeless and not a street person just yet, but desperate. I got to the point of feeling helpless and hopeless. And so I was actually wanted to hurt myself. So I left Vernon with my car with the intentions of wrapping it around a pole. Make it look like an accident, like I didn't want to hurt my family about that or whatever, but I don't know how that car was turned around. I was heading towards Kelowna. I have no idea how that car got turned around or how I ended up driving into my friend's driveway. My friend and her husband had invited me to come and stay with them. And I call it an angel, turned that car around and got me back up there. And that's where I stayed with my friends. And we had, again, hours and hours and hours of God talk. And so she shared her faith with me, and she shared all about Jesus. And I was, it was a crazy time. It was 3 months I stayed with them. I was in school at the time. Again, God's provision. Here I was, helpless and hopeless, feeling like there was no future. Really, why am I even going to school? I got straight A's that semester.
Wow.
That's a God thing, right? But sharing God talk with my friend and April 18th, 1988, I became a Christ follower. Prayed a prayer for salvation. And it's pretty amazing. So, 2 dark nights of the soul in my life. Once was I was about 12, and once just weeks before becoming a Christian. And that really was, I see God's hand of provision and protection through a better part of my life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so now here you are, however many years later, and you're a pastor here at Broadway. And so I'm wondering, how did that even happen? How did you get from one of the lowest moments of your life to being here, getting to run Celebrate Recover and connecting to some other people in their lowest moments?
Well, of course, after the semester finished, then I had to come down here to finish my undergraduate degree. And so I had every intention of heading straight back to Vernon after that. I thought that's where my friends were. If I had friends to go back to, I felt. And so I was a Christ follower at that point. Came down here, got hooked into Broadway, very spiritual way of getting hooked into Broadway church. It was because they had a bus ministry, and I have a Class 2 driver's license, and they had a baseball team. So, hey, what else could a person need, right? Yeah. And so I came here, finished my undergraduate in psychology and criminology up in SFU, and discovered that, hey, I really could learn. I was an adult, well into my adult years, getting an undergraduate degree. And so I decided to go and get my master's degree out at Trinity at ACTS, at the seminary. And so there I was, learning. I call myself a spiritual sponge. So I just couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough of God stuff. I love to learn about God and Jesus and all that. And so I just, I was there going to school, but I was a 4-year-old Christian. I didn't have Bible school. And the rest of the students in seminary basically were a lot of pastors who had come to get their master's degree. And so I worked very hard. I would spend, I loved every minute of it. And chapel service every morning, just absorbed it. And, but I studied hard. I would take between chapel service and classes and doing homework and 16 hours a day doing work. And I remember one time I was just flat out on the floor of my room, just crying out to God. I loved it, but I was getting overwhelmed. So I was saying, God, what do you want with all this education? My family, they're great people. They are hard workers, but education was not high in the priority of our family. In fact, I'm the only one of many cousins. I probably have 40 cousins. My mom had a very large family that she came from. I was the only one to get an advanced degree in anything. So I was crying out to God, what are you going to do with all this education? It's so hard to keep up, and although I love it, yada, yada. So I'm crying out to him, and as clear as I ever heard God, it wasn't like this big audible booming voice, Sheila, you will. But it was, you're going to love those who feel unlovable. And you're going to go to a place, I'm going to send you to a place that many people find very scary. Well, first off, I thought, God, you have a real sense of humor. I'm going to love those who feel unlovable. I feel unlovable. And so, and then I thought, scary place. I had worked in a group home for adolescents that couldn't live at home for whatever reason. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there. But he had other intentions. So that's where, if I had a calling on my life, that's as clear as it got. I never said, Sheila, you're going to be a pastor, or, this is why. It was, you're going to love those who feel unlovable. So I didn't know where that was going to take me, but I ended up in a ministry in downtown East Vancouver. And because of some of my past and stuff, that was not a scary place for me. And I thought, yeah, that's why God said it will be a scary place. Some people feel it's a scary place. And so that's where I worked, addictions counselor, and I worked down there and loved those who felt unlovable. Yeah. That's
amazing. I love how God gives you that call. You're going to love those who feel unlovable, but you were saying you yourself felt like that. Yeah. And so out of that brokenness comes your calling. Yeah. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. I love the fact that God made it so clear. He emphasized, feel unlovable. Right?
Right.
Nobody's unlovable. Right? So, yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, hearing that you've been a pilot and a counselor, what are some of the other jobs that you've had in your life?
Oh boy, that's a long list, Des. That's a long list. Well, I think anything with wheels or tracks, with levers or a steering wheel, if I didn't know how to drive it or operate it, I would figure it out.
Wow.
Right? So I worked in the mines, of course, loaders and graders.
In the mines?
In the mine up north, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so lots of different kinds of heavy duty equipment. I delivered freight for Canadian Freightways, right? Yeah, I've managed a dry cleaners. We'll talk about that, I think, probably. Again, an addictions counselor, downtown East Vancouver, worked in a group home. The list really goes on. I have a very diverse background.
Yeah, you're a woman of many talents, and you ended up here at Broadway. So how long have you been here at Broadway?
Since 1988.
So how many years is that?
Lots.
Okay, lots. We'll just say lots.
Lots.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea at all. I share an office with you, and I didn't know that you could do any of that. Okay, well, Pastor Shiela, I'm wondering, I know ministry and life has a lot of ups and downs, and I'm wondering if maybe you could share with us, what is something hard that you've had to walk through?
Yeah. Well, I talked about, the dark night of my soul where I felt like hurting myself. Mm-hmm. I've had other ups and downs, and like both those dark nights of my soul where I wanted to hurt myself, it was prior to becoming a Christ follower. Mm-hmm. Now, I think everybody has ups and downs. There's times of feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, disappointed. And so I have some of those, and that's just, I think that's part of life.
Right.
But prior to, when I was 19 years old, I said I managed a dry cleaners. I gave my younger brother a job at this dry cleaners. He wanted to be an aviation mechanic. And so moved from northern BC where my parents lived to finish his grade 12 at a school in Edmonton where I was managing a dry cleaners. He came there, I gave him a job. It was basically from 4 till 9, and he died in that dry cleaner. So I felt guilt and shame for years and years and years and years, and I could never figure out why I could never really grieve the loss of him. He was 16, not quite 16, a week from being 16 years old, and so I could never quite figure that out. And it was only after becoming a Christ follower, I've had 3 great mentors in my life, and since I had one of my mentors, and God brought to mind a conversation that I'd had with my younger brother Kevin, and this may well have been, it was perhaps that conversation why I felt so much guilt and shame over his death. Not only the fact that, in fact, I was the manager, I hired him. He asked me for a ride home that night, and I said no. But this conversation may have aided that, right? And so with this mentor, God brought these conversations back to my mind, and I went, whoa, and I shared it with my mentor. And she said, Sheila, even if that is true, that, Kevin died because of those conversations, you're still forgiven. Wow. I said, no way, I couldn't be forgiven for that. But she said, yeah. And so when I finally started to really process that and understand that, yeah, God can forgive me for even that, even if that, I won't know the side of heaven if it did, if that was, a factor in his death, but nonetheless, I would still be forgiven. That's huge. That's huge for anybody who's going through any kind of guilt and shame for stuff, that bring it to the Lord. It's forgivable. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that and for being so vulnerable. And that sounds like some really deep grief that you've had to walk through.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on this a little bit about bringing it to the Lord. But if there's someone who's watching today who maybe has gone through something similar, who has some deep grief or sorrow in their life, is there some encouragement or advice that you would give them if they're facing a similar situation?
I heard a pastor once say that our Christian walk has to be both horizontal and vertical, right? So we have to be building our relationship with God. So dig into His Word. What are His promises? And hang on to them for all you're worth. And you're worth a lot, right? So dig into God. So make sure that vertical relationship is growing. And with every vertical relationship, as you increase your vertical relationship with God, horizontal relationships with one another will be growing. And so reaching out to another person. That's why I love Celebrate Recovery so much, because we have a fifth step. So any recovery 12-step or whatever would be have the fifth step, which is to share your inventory with another human being. And so you find a trusted, safe environment and share all that stuff. And it's like liberating. It lifts feels like sometimes the world off your back when you can share with another human being. They don't run away and they don't judge you. And so I would encourage anybody who might be experiencing similar to this, build your relationship with God, continue to grow in God, and hang on to those for all you're worth, and you're worth a lot. And then find a trusted human being to share that stuff with. Build your relationship with that person. Share with them honestly. And don't run away. Don't hide. Don't think that it's unforgivable or whatever. You need to make sure that you are sharing with another human being as well.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And Pastor Shiela, I've heard you talk about Celebrate Recovery a couple times, and I know that we run that here at the church. So for someone who's watching who maybe doesn't know what Celebrate Recovery is or how they can even get connected to that, maybe you could just let them know how?
Of course. Celebrate Recovery has been around Broadway. I think we're coming into our 14th year. It's a very vibrant, important ministry. I've had many people say they didn't know what they'd do if they didn't have Celebrate Recovery. It's for hurts, habits, and hang-ups. So while the name may be misleading to make you think that it's only about people with addictions, not so. It's hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And quite frankly, I think there's not a person sitting in one of our seats in our church that couldn't benefit from just looking for a safe place to talk about what's going on in their life or has gone in their life. Unforgiveness or grief or, disordered eating, everything. There's just so many avenues that a person can explore and grow and experience healing. It's under the care and healing platform on our website. So Celebrate Recovery, you can just do bway.ca/Celebrate Recovery, and awesome. We'll get your name and be inviting you to come and join us every Tuesday night.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Pastor Shiela, thank you so much for sharing with us. I think my favorite thing about hearing you talk today is hearing God's redemption in your life and in your story, and seeing how He gave you this call when you were young in seminary, and seeing how that worked out in your life. So it's been such a joy and a privilege to get to talk to you today. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Unscripted.